Hey everyone, welcome back to D&J's Epic Side Quest. I'm Justin, and this is...
This is Derek, and we've got Matt from the Queers of Time podcast today. One quarter of it, anyways. We're excited to have him here. So hopefully everybody will enjoy the show. And if this is the first episode you listen to, I think you have picked a good one.
Hey, yeah, thanks. This is Matt. I'm happy to be here. I am one quarter of the Queers of Time podcast. My other co-hosts are Kat, James, and Camille, and we're spread all around the globe, the UK, Canada. Here, I'm in Minneapolis, and James is over out west. I am also on Twitter at Matthew L. Reyes. It's with one T. I'm also a writer. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Well, welcome on to our show. We're happy to have you here.
And it's nice to be in a show that's all based in Minnesota because time zones are a thing.
They're a very real thing.
Yeah, when we recorded our wrap up for our book that we just finished, we had a guest all the way from India. So I think it was like what 12:30 at night, her time when we recorded. I'm honestly not quite sure, but
No, we started 12:30 our time, and she's 10, and I guess it kind of threw me off. I didn't think that a time zone would be half an hour ahead, but she was 10 and a half hours ahead of us.
Oh gosh. Yeah, when when we record, we always have to be pretty much on time because uh, it's usually close to midnight in the UK, and Camille, can't stay up till 1 o'clock, and we try to keep our episodes to like an hour, just for their sake. And if we're late, there's no episode, at least not with Camille. So it's nice to have, one time zone.
Yeah, it's I can see that being a challenge, and I'll say I've listened to all the episodes on your show so far. I've really enjoyed it. Just a different take, and even as a straight guy, I just really enjoy your show and the content you guys put out. It's really great.
No, thanks. Yeah, we there's there's only so much you can do with the books from that specific angle. And with the show, obviously, with Moraine and Swan, and New Spring the book, we have a lot of content for that. But we are going to probably start branching out into not just queer related content. Just taking it from the four of us, that sort of angle. But I'm glad that you enjoy the show. It's been fun. I did not think I would ever be part of a podcast because it just seemed like a lot of work, and it is. And I'm a bad millennial. I don't know tech, so I'm glad that I have three co-hosts who are smarter than me, so they know how to do all the technical side of stuff.
yeah, I can relate to the whole podcast. I never would have ever in my mind imagined that I would be creating a podcast with a buddy. So it's weird because I'm not. I know I'm probably gonna get shamed. Just but yeah, I've never really gotten into podcasts, and it's not part of my repertoire, so to speak. But I'm slowly getting there.
Yeah, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I try to. I love lore. I like fiction podcasts. Um, but it's hard for me to sit still or even walk and listen to one. So I'm trying to get better about that because that podcast is such a popular way of information and media these days. Trying to get
Right.
with the times.
Well, then we can work on it together because I am in the very much the same boat.
It happens. So how did you two meet? I'm sure that you covered this on your show, but I'm curious.
We've known each other since, was it sixth, seventh grade?
Seventh
Wow,
grade. Yeah. It was
nice.
Callahan's art class.
That's right, yeah. So we've known each other for quite a while, and what year we did track together? Yeah, we did track. I think that must have been seventh or eighth grade.
I think that was eighth grade.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Eighth grade.
That's
then,
awesome.
yeah, after high school, kind of went our ways. Justin moved up to the metro. I've been down here, and well, it's probably been about a year now since we've really reconnected and started talking a lot again.
Yeah.
Because Justin was close to finishing the Wheel of Time, and we were both really excited about the show coming out. And then I invited him down for the debut of the show, and his family, they came down with him, and we were just talking about books and stuff, and like I just threw out this idea to him about doing this podcast, and we just kind of ran with it.
That's really awesome. I love how the Wheel of Time sort of brings people together. So like right before the pandemic, I had maybe, I think I was on Twitter maybe once a month or so, and I had like maybe 30 followers. Half of them were like law school classmates. And I'm a lawyer, unfortunately. I don't tell people that a whole lot, but I don't practice. Thank God. I got out of that hellhole real quick. Um, but so like most of my Twitter followers were just law school classmates, and then I tweeted it's something about the Wheel of Time, and default Rand account found me and retweeted that, and just sort of exploded from there. And I've met a lot of really awesome people, and reconnected with a few older friends. Not not going back that far, but and I went to Jordan Con last year and met a lot of people in person, and it was a blast. So I love how these books sort of bring people together a lot more than I've seen with other properties.
Yeah, it really has, because I remember as Justin was getting close to finishing, and it seemed like every day I was asking, okay, what's happening? Where are you at? Because I mean, I knew what had happened at that point, and I was just excited for him to finish. Because you were pushing really hard to finish before the show started, and I think you did, if I remember right.
I mean, I feel like my timeline is all messed up because I feel like I just finished reading this February of 2022.
Was
Um,
it? I don't know. I thought maybe you were going to try to finish, and it just didn't work out.
no, I mean, I wasn't, I guess now, oh yeah, now that you bring it up, I was just like, well, it's only the first season, potentially the second book that would be in the first season. I had wanted to finish, I think before it came out, the show, I was maybe halfway through New Spring. So I had finished Crossroads of Twilight, and then I read New Spring, and then I went on to Knife of Dreams. No, actually, I was in Knife of Dreams, so I had finished New Spring. That's what I wanted to get done.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read New Spring last, and by last I mean I read it a whole year and a half after I finished the main series. It took me a few attempts to get through the Wheel of Time, not gonna lie, though that's not so much to say about the books and the writing as it is I was in law school, and that really sucks the joy out of everything you used to love. And I always loved reading, and I could manage to get through three books during law school, and I just couldn't keep up with all the characters and the plots and everything, and my brain was always tired from classes and from exams. So I started the series three times, and third time was the charm. I started reading about 2019, I think, or maybe it was early 2020. I started my third attempt, and that one was the one that took. It's great. I love the series, and I especially like that I didn't read it all during law school because I would associate it with that time,
Yeah.
which
I
would suck.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure about Mr. Derek. I feel like you tried it once and then the second time you were able to succeed. But that's how it was for me. I had read it because, Derek introduced the series to me, and I read the first, I think I got to the beginning of Lords of Chaos or Lord of Chaos. And then I don't know, I think I was turning 16, 15, 14, 15 or 16. I don't even remember. And I just got caught up with being a teenager and causing mischief and getting into trouble and stuff. So, but it was funny because like up until I stopped reading, I would always have these moments throughout my day, I don't know, maybe once a few times a year really where I would think about like what I did read, and I'll be like put a mental note in like, I want to finish that series. Like, you need to do it. But then, having kids and splitting up with their mother and just all of the drama that was that relationship.
Hmm.
And then, think fragments of the story again would pop back in and be like, God, that was so cool. Why don't I just pick this up? And then, I think it was uh, the summer of 2021. I think it was May of 2021 where I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna do this. Um, and yeah, I was able to finish about February of 2022. It took me about 9 months to do 14 books, 15 books, 14.
Well, you certainly beat me out there. It took me about a year and a half, because I would read several books between each Wheel of Time book. Here's the important question. Do y'all have the cool and hideous original covers, or do you have like the sleek new versions?
Originals.
We have the Daryl K. Sweet artwork ones.
Nice.
I do not like the monotone ones. Like, I'm good.
Yeah, I kind of hate the paper, not the art, like the actual picture paperbacks, but like the small mass market paperbacks that just have the wheel in a different color. That's awful. But no, the sweet the sweet covers are, I just don't see how anybody could want anything else. They are beautiful and corny and remind me of a knockoff D&D game box. And why would you want something else? It's perfect.
Yeah.
100% agree with that statement.
Yeah, I will third that. And so much so that I know that they're not in reprint, and getting them in good condition is expensive.
Hmm.
But I do have the full series, um, and they're all wrapped in plastic. Like, I'm not reading them. They're just gonna collect dust.
Yeah, they're in storage. They're in a storage box, a sealed plastic one. I had them on display on the shelves for a long time, but I have a lot of books, and the ones that I'm not currently reading had to go somewhere. Um, so we were also going to talk about the show, right?
Yeah, that was, I think, kind of the main thing for inviting you on, and
Yeah.
I liked how you worded things when you and I were talking, and coming up with a topic. But in defense of season 1 of the Wheel of Time, the TV show.
Yeah, it's a topic that we have not really covered. Like we haven't had an episode dedicated to just that on our podcast, and I thought it would be a good idea to talk about the show and the nature of adaptations and more or less saying in a very polite, well structured, well argumented way why the book Pierce are full of shit. Um,
I think that sounds great.
I like it, and a wonderful segue as well from the books to the TV show and the topic of our podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you know, these people on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and stuff, they're so infuriating, and I just want to say, they're full of shit and they're just racist, most of them. But you gotta like say that in a way that is I guess backed up and sounds professional, or else you're just mudslinging back at them, which they deserve the mud, but there's a lot to talk about in defense of the show. So,
Absolutely, and don't forget misogyny as well. Misogynist.
yes.
Um, and I feel like when it comes to these types of people, there's a little bit of hope, I guess, for me personally, that they're willing to see the other side, but I know that they won't, and that's fine with me. But I think that there needs to be something out there that is defending the show, and not necessarily that it needs to be defended, so to speak, because it can hold its own. But I feel like there needs to be some support on the positive side of things rather than just the negative, right?
Yeah, and I hate a lot that Twitter is already sort of a cesspool for triggering just vitriolic arguments. But these people have become so nasty with their hate of the show that a lot of us book fans or show fans are we're almost overly defensive of the show because we're used to um, complaints or criticism about the show being, based in racism, misogyny, homophobia, uh, and vitriol, that we sort of forget that, legitimate criticism is a thing, and it's still something that we can do and debate in good faith. The overly negative reaction has sort of just polarized the community, and I think hopefully it's slowing down a bit. Hopefully, the people who really hate the show and are just being trolls um, are mostly blocked by Twitter of Time and the Wheel of Time community in general. But it's always a thing to watch out for. Like, we can defend the show without you know getting just as nasty as those who hate it.
For sure. I'm just hoping whenever we find out when season 2 is coming that, these people don't ramp up their efforts and, take another shot at it. I know for myself, I was trying to rewatch this series these last couple weeks, and I didn't get through all of it. I got through about half of it, but in preparing for this, I'd done a little bit of digging through Reddit and Twitter and that type of thing just to see, I want to kind of find things that people didn't like, and some of the common ones that I found were change or poor writing and bad casting. And Justin, I think this was you that added the woke issues, more diverse sexualities and races causing dust up, which isn't legitimate. I think that was your point, or maybe it was Matt's. I'm not sure if you added that, but
I don't recall writing that. I feel like I came in a little bit later. Just because of life events. So
I also don't remember writing that in the documents. So it's maybe Nynaeve reached across from the barriers of different realities and wrote that in for us or something.
But it's been a long time since I've read the first few books of the series. But I remembered enough, that I was going to know what was going to happen in the show, and I expected some changes. And I don't think those changes are bad. The one I remember seeing probably a lot of, especially after the show aired, was Perrin's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And Justin, when me and Justin were watching that the night it came out, like when he swung the axe and caught her, like both of us like audibly gasped, had our hands at her face, like, holy shit, like I couldn't believe it happened. And I don't know why people thought that was like a bad change, I don't know. I really liked it. It worked for me.
Yeah. So as someone we actually discussed this on the podcast, I think, with Allie from the Will Takes podcast. So I liked the fact that they did. I like the concept. Perrin is a really hard character to adapt because a lot of what he does is in his head. A lot of his angst is internalized. And if there was a totally faithful adaptation of that, it would just be minutes and minutes of Marcus just sort of staring at the camera. And who wants to see that? Marcus is great. Let's give him some, actual external things to do. I think the problem that a lot of people had with that was the trope of fridging the wife, which is something that does happen a lot, unfortunately. And I can see where I can see why people were upset about that. I think my solution would have been to have Perrin kill like his brother or something like that. Because I get why they had to do something. They had to traumatize Perrin from the get-go, in connection with his own strength and the concept of violence, because that's so huge in his character arc. I don't know. I'm still torn on killing Layla like that. It's a trope, but it was the concept itself was necessary for us to get the idea of who Perrin is and why he's having these struggles. So I don't know.
Well, to piggyback off of that, so to speak, I think that Perrin, from what I recall in the books, there's a lot of internal dialogue within himself about, things that happened in his past and when he was younger. And how else do you adapt this character that is so strong that he also almost has to like, watch his strength, so to speak? How do you
Mhm.
convey that visually without having minutes of internal dialogue about something that the viewers have no connection to because these things happen way later on in the books, you know? So
Yeah.
I think that that's what they were ultimately trying to go for, along with the many points that you have made so eloquently.
Yeah, it's just it's not a show problem, it's just I guess a society problem. It's really easy for us to understand and convey, you know, oh, this guy's wife has been killed, and now he has issues. It's a overly relied on trope that I guess we as a society just have gotten a bit too used to, and there are other ways of having that happen. But I think if they continue to use Layla in the dreams, like that really creepy and cool dream sequence that Perrin had later in the season, I think they can sort of uh, ameliorate some of those problems of the fridging argument, I guess.
That was a term I had never heard until I listened to your podcast.
Oh,
Though,
fridging.
yeah, I'd never heard that before. So
Yeah, me neither. This is the
I
first
guess
time I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's we rely on, tropes are tropes. They are neither inherently good or bad, I guess. Well, I guess some are inherently bad, like if they're racist tropes and stuff like that. But it's when something becomes so used in fiction that it almost becomes a shorthand. I guess that's when it becomes a problem. And um, yeah, again, I'm very conflicted still on Perrin killing his wife. I think it was the correct decision for them to make, to have him kill somebody who was close to him to get to save all the internal angst that Perrin has in the books. Um, but the dark person in me is like, why can't they just like kill his kid brother or something? That's even more. We hardly kill kid brothers in media these days. Let's kill more kids. Um, More trauma.
there would be some trauma there for sure.
Um, and now I have to make a joke about getting canceled on Twitter every episode I'm in the podcast, and I have to get canceled for saying let's commit violence against kids on media.
Well, the good thing is we know it's a joke, so I think you'll be safe for another day on Twitter.
We got you,
Yeah.
man.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes, and I think I wanted to talk about the idea of story versus plot, and a lot of what I would consider the more, if not legitimate criticisms, the ones that are less shitty, less based in misogyny, racism, sexism, are complaints about the show changing so much in what happened, but the plot actually is very, very intact. So what I talk about on the other podcast is the idea of story versus plot, and it's sort of a nebulous thing when you first hear about it. And when I first started writing, I had a hard time with it. But basically, story is like what happens in each chapter, and plot is how the chapters weave together to form the whole structure, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
so when people, so like Rand and Tam going to town and having a conversation, and there's the moodiness both in the show and in the books. That's story. That's like the flavor of the world and the characters interacting with each other. And the plot is, before the shadow falls over two rivers and how that plays into everything else in the series. So there were a lot of changes in of story. We didn't get a lot of things, like a lot of specific scenes that were in the books. Like I wanted to see Whitebridge because I always pictured it in my head as something really cool, and I wanted to see how the show would interpret that. But we didn't get Whitebridge, but that's okay because Whitebridge was a story element and not a plot element. And a lot of these show haters don't distinguish between story and plot. So they say that the show just destroyed the plot and did all this, but really the plot itself is almost 100% intact. I was a little iffy on some plot elements in episode 8, but we had COVID, we had Barney leaving, and I think they did as good as they could have done under those situations or those circumstances. But generally, yeah, like we have the idea of the Dragon Reborn, we have the idea of the last battle's coming, and the general progression of the party. Matt and the dagger, which is a huge part of his character growth. Perrin and the wolves, Rand and the One Power. So like all the major plot beats are there. So I don't buy this idea that they totally destroy the books.
No, not at all. You make a really good point. I mean, I think every one of us there's probably things that got left out that we would have loved to have seen, and it's okay that they're not there. I mean, the one I really wanted to see was really early on, after Tam gets stabbed or, cut from the Trolloc sword. I really wanted to see them going through the woods and evading the Fade, and I always really liked that part of the story early on. But I mean, you still kind of get that, like you said, the overall intent is there. We just maybe don't see all the specifics.
Yeah, and that would have been really cool to see too. But I guess unfortunately it had to be cut for the introducing Dark Friends, not Shadow Friends, Shadow Spawn and Dark Friends, which is sort of a take some, give some.
Yeah, I mean it's nothing I would have gotten all pissed off about, that it wasn't there. But like you said, the plot is still there, and I think that's probably the most important thing. You explained it really well. All the major pieces are there.
Yeah. Justin, I saw you went off on mute. I didn't want to interrupt you again.
Oh no, it's fine. Maybe unrelated, being that it was said when you first started talking about story versus plot, but I could have swore that they were in Whitebridge in the show, and it was Caemlyn that they didn't show.
No, they didn't do Caemlyn or Whitebridge. Whitebridge was, I think, replaced with, oh gosh, I don't remember the name of it. It's when Matt and Rand were at the pub and we met Dana.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
I can't remember the name of the town either, but I think when I first watched that, I thought it was Whitebridge too. I'm like, well, like I thought the bridge was going to be like massive. Like that bridge isn't impressive at all.
I could have swore when they walked over the summit of the hill that they were like, "That's Whitebridge down there."
I said that's going downhill because Matt was complaining about walking uphill.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe it was Shadar Logoth that they were walking away from. I think I need to rewatch it.
Okay. Well, no worries. It doesn't really sway my opinion of the show either which way. It's a city. I
Mhm.
thought that the way that they did the Dark Friend, Dana, was super interesting.
They need to have her back on the show. I don't care what, like the actress, not necessarily the character, but I mean, when she switches from friendly innkeeper to dark friend, it was just one of the best like micro moments of the show. So they've got to have the actress back in some capacity or something. Maybe the Dark One resurrects her, or I don't know.
She was good. She was kind of creepy because I'm just, like, and I rewatched that episode today even, and I'm just like trying to pick up on different things, like, how does she know all this stuff?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, so it's and I guess to segue a bit into one of probably the least legitimate criticism of the show, actors and the choice of actors. I don't, there were some actors who, they were good, but there were no bad actors in my view. I think everyone did the job well, and most, if not all, of the main characters really fit in the role they were playing. And we all know, at least we three know, the real reason why people complained about the casting, and it wasn't whether or not Zoe Robbins or Madeline could act. It's that they didn't have the skin tone that some of these purists were envisioning.
Right. That is 100% my opinion as well. That is the real reason why they are upset.
And it's it's really annoying because we a lot of how we I don't want to say old school fans, but a lot of those of us who read the books when the original artwork was the only portrayal of characters. They're very white, but that doesn't mean that uh, the characters were necessarily white or pale in the books. Uh, a an example I like to go to is have either of y'all read Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series?
No.
No, I'm not.
Really good. If you want to read about a wizard boy going to wizard school and learning things by an author who isn't constantly attracting attention to herself on Twitter, Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea series is phenomenal. It's really beautiful. But she was very clear in the books that most of her characters were dark skinned, and I think in the original Dust Jacket, Ged, the main character, he did have brown skin, but a lot of uh, subsequent editions had him as white and had all the characters as white. So if you were to look at the books, you would have assumed that they were white because that's unfortunately what sells, or did sell, and still today does sell. Um, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So the point is that just because the cover depicts characters a certain way doesn't mean that they are that way in the books. I mean, look at Rand in Lord of Chaos. He looks like a bodice ripper romance hero, and it's just such a bad illustration, and I love it so much. Like I just love that illustration. And then Perrin in Knife of Dreams. I don't know what's going on with Perrin. He's like a hobbit, like a furry hobbit. So like if you I guess if you headcanon the characters based on their appearances on the covers, the more legitimate complaint is that Marcus Rutherford isn't a 4'2" furry hobbit, and that Yosha Stradowski is not a awkwardly large shouldered romantic lead or something like that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when they announced the castings and you saw the headshots of the actors and actresses. I remember like specifically Perrin and Egwene. I was like, okay, I might not have known this is what I was picturing, but this is exactly what I wanted. Speaking for myself, reading these books in middle school, our school was very predominantly white. We didn't have a lot of diversity at that point. So reading these books, I just kind of imagined them all white. But once, I got older, it wasn't that I thought they had to be. And especially once we got these castings, by no way was I offended by it. I thought it was great. And even Egwene is probably my favorite character in the series. And when I'd never heard of Madeline before this, but I remember when I saw her, I was like, okay, this is really going to work really well. And I'm really excited to see this. That was probably the one that got me the most excited. And Rand, I thought, yeah, he's going to work great. There was not one that I was disappointed by.
I would agree with that. Nynaeve was probably is my favorite character. She just embodies everything that the character Nynaeve portrays, and you get a really good glimpse of that throughout season 1. Like that is Nynaeve to the T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with this whole, race thing, it's just ridiculous because unless it matters, okay, so Rand has to be a ginger with, light-ish eyes, and he has to be paler than everyone in the Two Rivers. That is the plot crucial element to his physicality, and that's what we got exactly. So what's with all the complaining about with dark skinned actors. I just don't get it. Besides Rand, uh, no one's race or at least their ethnicity, their skin tone doesn't matter. It's a totally ridiculous argument. And I will say, this will get me crucified by some people, but I'm actually more excited about Donald Finn as Matt than I was about Barney. Barney just never really, I guess I never really clicked with him, and I know that Matt in season one didn't have a lot going on. Uh, but just from what we've seen with the New York Comic Con panel, in Donald's interview, I'm not sure if y'all have seen it, but he's got the Matt energy down, even when he's not, playing Matt. So I'm really excited for him, and it's unfortunate that we lost Barney, but I guess I can't say I'm too sad about it.
I have not seen the interview. I did see a picture. I don't know who posted it or where. I don't remember where I saw it, but it had, the two of them, individually side by side,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, well, they look awfully similar, so I think it'll work. But I really did like Barney as Matt, and I kind of told myself I shouldn't because I knew he wasn't going to be back, and I couldn't help it. Just kind of his. I felt there's a lot of just maybe almost like dad humor, I guess.
Mm.
Just his little one-liners that kind of won me over, and I I can't do this because I know he's not going to be back, and it's just not going to be the same after that. But I I'm hoping I've got faith that Donald, that was his name, right? Donald Finn.
Yeah, Donald Finn. He's
I think we're going to
Irish.
be in good hands.
Yeah, I think so too. I will say I did like the way that Barney delivered the dad humor one-liners. Someone joked maybe we should just have a different Matt actor every season, but that would be a little too chaotic.
Yeah, yeah.
This
Well,
is not Doctor Who.
I don't know. I guess Matt's character in the show, I remember reading the series and not really liking Matt until the end of the series. Um, and I got that feeling with this character as well. So I feel like the way that they kind of play off between Matt's character arc and what they set up with his character was beautifully executed
Mm,
because how else do you visualize, you know, um, I guess more or less his environment and even with just the additive of his parents, and clearly there's some dysfunction there, and he's kind of taken on the I have to take care of my siblings because no one else will. You don't really get like that much of a sense in the books, purely just because that happens throughout the series, those types of situations. So I thought that it was well done as far as Matt's character, but I personally was never able to relate to him until later in the series.
yeah, Dagger Matt's hard to relate to. And speaking
Yeah, right.
back on his parents, oh my God, did y'all see all the complaining that Abel Coffin's character was assassinated or whatever? He's a minor character, that doesn't mean I don't know, like making him a drunk, like how is that a character assassination of someone who we barely even meet in the series? And at that point, you're just grasping at straws.
Well, right, and I mean, we know that as readers of the series that this isn't the last that we'll see of Abel, but at the end of the day, like I think that a lot of purists or haters of the show are not recognizing the fact that like something major just happened at the Two Rivers, and this is supposed to be Amon's Field is supposed to be a very untouched by the world type of town, and everybody's just a tight knit community. But I don't think that they're recognizing what it is that Trollocs invading the Two Rivers
Hmm.
has done to this town. And even if he is a drunk in this show, or whatever dysfunction may be interpreted or perceived there, I think that they're forgetting that like characters are still at the core human and have the ability and the decisions to change. And I
Right.
think that the invasion of Trollocs in the Two Rivers is definitely something that I would hope as the show continues through the series, goes back and like kind of we see the change as viewers.
Sure. And I think a lot of people forget that Matt's dad, I think he was described as a horse trader, which seems like fantasy shorthand for horse salesman, which I'm not sure how many people know. Like that's like the shadiest type of salesman, stereotypically that you can be. So sort of wonder like how off the show really was. I mean, not that it matters, but it's just, it's another bit of evidence that the book purists really didn't understand what they were reading to begin with.
I would 100% agree with that. Spot on.
Um, you know, some change and some changes, with all respect to Robert Jordan, needed to be made, like the White Cloaks and the Forsaken in the show. I mean, in the books are just sort of goofy. And in the show, the White Cloaks are fucking terrifying. Sorry, I'm not sure if you curse or not on the podcast, but they're really terrifying.
Oh, we fucking
all the time.
Okay.
Don't worry
All
about
right. It. Good. But yeah, so I'm hoping that the Forsaken are treated the same because we have all these characters built up as being the most horrifying villains of their age, and then they make their appearance on the screen, and it's just sort of like a clown car, which is funny. I guess it works for the books, but for the show, I really like the fact that they're taking a scarier interpretation of both the White Cloaks and the Forsaken.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind seeing it a little darker, and I'll be excited to see the Forsaken for sure.
Now that you guys are on the topic of kind of the darker theme now, and as you brought up, Matt, that isn't something that we necessarily, as you mentioned, clown car, which in my mind I'm laughing hysterically when it came to the Forsaken. But here's the thing. Here's kind of like maybe a little bit of purist hypocriticalness from their end. They didn't seem. I don't ever see anybody complaining about how much darker the show was, or even gory. I mean, in no way would I ever have imagined Robert Jordan descriptively describing, much like he did characters' clothes, Trollocs ripping each other apart and intestines and entrails and eating, and like that's just like severed heads rolling all over. Like that's not something that I got a huge big sense of in reading The Wheel of Time. It was very like PG violence, whereas the show is so much more darker and brutal and visceral, and I like that. But I don't see purists talking about, oh well, that wasn't how it happened in the book.
Yeah, but all I remember from the book was, you'd get stories of people ending up in the cook pots, and that was kind of the end of it.
Right.
Yeah, it's Robert Jordan shied away from a lot of gratuitous violence and sex, and the show is, I don't want to say updating, but the show is basically reflecting modern sensibilities with that. And of course, you don't see people complaining about the violence because, we unfortunately as a society are desensitized to it, and the show haters are the types who sort of revel in. They're the types of people who are more comfortable seeing, I forgot who said this, but they're more comfortable seeing two men shoot each other than to see two men holding hands. So they don't care about violence. It doesn't threaten their masculinity. It doesn't threaten their sense of their place in the world. I'm certainly not complaining about the violence. I'm fine with the violence in the books. I'm fine with the violence in the show. But you make a really good point. You don't see them complaining about it, and you sort of got to wonder why.
Exactly. And I think it just more points to the fact that they're just looking for any small thing to nitpick because of racist or misogynistic ideals, because they didn't agree with that part. So it's bad.
Yeah. And, oh my God. Speaking of that, have y'all heard about the Nynaeve holding the sword discourse?
No.
Oh God. So
I don't think either of us have really seen much from whatever was talked about for this panel. I mean, I really don't have any information on it at all. What came from it?
Yeah, so there was I think it was like a 40-second clip of images from season 2, and
Is that
There's
the like rapid fire
yeah, the
thing?
rapid fire. And there's one of Nynaeve swinging a sword with the warders, and the book purists just lost their shit. I mean, you would have thinking that it was all men, and you would have thought that, you know, Nynaeve was like taking away their manhood just by holding a sword and daring to hold a sword, and they're complaining about how it's not in her character. And like, this is less than a second of a clip, and it could be one of so many things. It could be the Aes Sedai trying to make her train to break her block. It could be uh, a dream. It could be her accepted test. It could be one of so many things. And but these people are complaining, oh, Nynaeve is she's so peaceful and she's so protective and she's a healer. She would never hold a sword. And I think they kind of forget that she threatens to like literally bash people over the head with wooden spoons and with her she has a thumping stick in the book to get people in line. So like, why are you complaining about a less than a second scene of Nynaeve holding a sword when in the books she literally has a stick for the purpose of assaulting people with?
Yeah,
This is true. Yeah.
I've never understood the, I guess, mindset of being upset about something before you've seen the finished product. I mean, even in the first season, you see Nynaeve with, I mean, she's got I guess, basically a dagger. You know, when the village gets attacked, she's got a dagger. She steals one from the Trolloc in the pool, stabs it. What was the other one? There was another time she used it too. Oh, when the army's coming for Loghain, you know,
Mhm.
she stabs a guy there. You know, so what's the difference if you're using a dagger or a sword?
Right. It's just, it's a weak argument that she's a pacifist, but she's not a pacifist, and that her whole thing is healing people. And, it is, but, she's not one of the Tuathon. She's not anti-violence. I mean, she will shank you if you are threatening her or her friends. And she's always
You
been
can
like
be
that.
more. Yeah, you can definitely be more than one thing.
Um, but they're simple-minded, and one can't expect too much from people whose masculinity is threatened by Nynaeve holding a sword.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
feel like people forget that fight or flight is a response that is our most basic instinct, whether that's
mhm.
physical, emotional, or mental. And the fact that we see Nynaeve standing up for herself, how that doesn't align with what they read in the books makes me think that they were probably either skipping pages or didn't really care to envision that because of their simple mindset.
Mhm.
So that they've just kind of like altered their reality about what they read, and it's pathetic.
Yeah, it's you know, time and time again we see these arguments from them, and when you look at the books, they just don't hold up. I mean, when people complained about two villagers being dark skinned, I went to a passage when Rand is talking to everyone's favorite red, Elida, and she's like, "Oh, you're much lighter complexioned than Two Rivers folk. Two Rivers folk are much darker than you are," and that's what we got in the show. Um, but these are also the same types of people who try to claim that scientifically black mermaids can't exist because of melanin or something underwater. I don't know. When they cast a black woman as
Yeah, the sun's
Ariel,
rays. Yeah,
oh my God. It's just they have nothing to stand on. But you point it out to them in the books and they call you woke, and that's it.
I mean, let's not forget that they're fictional characters at the end of the day.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
Right. A black mermaid doesn't make any scientific sense. Because mermaids don't make sense because they're not real. They're fantasy.
Eh,
It has
all
nothing
right.
to do with whether she's black or white. Like
But
if
we're
we're
okay
gonna,
with the talking fish.
we're okay with a
All
talking
right.
fish, but you can't have dark skin because this is gender erasure. Oh God, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's
it,
another tangent.
it's just something. It's just something else. These people, they are something else. Bless their hearts, as we say in the South. Bless their hearts.
You got
Oh,
to you
hey.
got to bring some of that southern up north here. So
Mhm.
So, unrelated to anything in the show, but rather related to a conversation that Derek and I had at the beginning of one of our episodes, and we both said something at the same time, and I was just like, "Oh, we owe you a Coke," or "I owe you a Coke," and Derek was just like, "Just don't put peanuts in it," and I was just like, "What are you talking about, dude?" And he was just like, "I think there's some people like in the southern states that put peanuts in their Coke, and maybe you can affirm, not
Yep.
that you've done it yourself, but maybe have seen or witnessed."
It is. So one thing about the South is we are not all the same. Putting peanuts in Coke is more of an Alabama, Georgia thing. I've seen it in Louisiana because I grew up in Louisiana, in central Louisiana, which, people think, oh, you lived in New Orleans. No, I did not grow up anywhere near New Orleans. It was like a 4-hour drive away. Um, so I saw some people every once in a while putting peanuts in Coke, but that's very much an Alabama, Georgia thing. The idea doesn't gross me out though. I mean, we eat shit that comes out the ground, so like, crawfish and shit like that. So,
That
I mean, I eat alligator for Christ's sake. I mean, I can't really
gotta have it
judge.
grilled. Gotta have it grilled gator.
I like deep fried gator more. Deep fried with some Tabasco sauce mixed with ketchup and lemon juice. That's it. That hits the spot.
Do you know
I'm
of
willing
any
to try it.
Do you know of any spots in Minnesota where we could get some gator outside of the state fair?
Nope. That's the only reason I used to go to the state fair before the pandemic was for gator.
S- Somebody
Um,
posted on Twitter. I remember engaging in the conversation, but their Hy-Vee had like a whole gator there.
real.
What?
Oh, that was Laura. That was Laura.
Okay.
Yeah. Gosh, her name is
Oh, it
Laura
was in St.
Camille.
Peter.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think so. Um,
Yeah, I heard they. That's quite random, but that's all right.
well, I'm gonna look up and see if there's any restaurants, and then if I find some, we're all gonna go get some gator.
if you do want authentic Southern food, Revival in Minneapolis, and there's one in St. Paul, is well, it's not the closest. It is very much authentic Southern food. They've got fried chicken, which is great fried chicken, the best fried chicken in Minnesota. And they've got collard greens, black-eyed peas, cornbread, all sorts
Sweet.
of Southern food, and it's all very genuine, true blue type of stuff. So I've been to a lot of places up here that think that they're serving Southern food.
Okay, but no gator, huh?
No gator. I even called. I emailed Revival asking if they sell fried chicken hearts off menu, but they never got back to me. I don't know why. Maybe they're not really Southern.
Dang.
uh,
Well, maybe before we transition back here, Matt, since you've been in Minnesota, have you had lutefisk?
I
Oh
have
god.
not. I've had lefse and I've found it to be delightful. I absolutely love lefse, but I have not had lutefisk.
I would not recommend
Yeah,
it.
don't. Yeah, no.
No, I'm not. I actually have an aversion to like smoked and processed fish products. If I eat fish, it's going to be like an actual fish that's been cooked or sushi. And the reason why is because when I was in law school, my first year, I had a roommate who was also from Minnesota, and he was just the most awkward guy ever. So many stories, but this is the one that's relevant. I came home from class one day, and all the lights in the apartment were off, and I heard this wet smacking sound.
What?
Oh
And it's
God.
not it's not not the X-rated kind of smacking sound. If it had been that, it probably would have been less traumatizing. This was like a wet sort of like Trolloc feasting on, humans type of smacking sound. And I turn the light on, and this guy who's like, 6'6" or something like that, he's hovering over the sink and just shoveling handfuls of smoked salmon into his mouth. And he's got the smoked salmon on a plate, and he just smells like fish. And I'm just looking at him, and he looks at me. He's like, "Oh, hey." and then it just keeps going back to shoveling smoked salmon in his mouth. And it was just the most bizarre, disgust. And I found him doing that several more times. So I have not had smoked salmon after that, and I don't plan on lutefisk at all.
I had to ask. That's all.
Sorry, when you ask a Southerner a simple question, you usually get a story along with it. So
No, that's great. I like it. That was awesome. I'm still gonna find us some gator to eat though.
hey, you do it and let me know where it is, and I'll be there.
Okay, sounds good.
Justin, I am all for it. I will give it a shot.
Do it. But yeah, I guess we could probably. I wish there were a way to segue gators into the Wheel of Time, but I guess going back to I guess the goal of the show and in defense of Wheel of Time, I feel like we've covered a fair amount about the writing and the arguments about wokeness, quote unquote. But another thing that I have people gripe about was the CGI and the VFX. And my background is I actually went to school for media arts and animation. Granted, the tools that I was taught back then would not apply nowadays, being that technology changes so quickly and things get better very quickly, very dramatically as well. But that's also kind of my point is that, I mean, was it the greatest CGI ever? Maybe, maybe not. But I mean, it's not like the studio that created the CGI and the VFX was. I mean, it's far from ILM or LucasArts level to that point. But I feel like a lot of people are forgetting how far CGI and visual effects have come in the last 25, 30 years. I mean, I was, I'm a big proponent of TikTok. I don't know why. It's just a train wreck at sometimes, and it's just I can't look away. But a lot of the things that I watch on TikTok pertain to animation, art, 3D modeling, drawing, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like in one of these TikToks, there was a claymation, like a before and after of the not Godzilla, fuck, King Kong movie from the 1930s using claymation of Kong essentially ripping the T-Rex's mouth open. And they compared that to Peter Jackson's King Kong. And it's just like, I think that these purists are forgetting to acknowledge the journey that visual effects have played. Like, it definitely could have been that the Wheel of Time, being that it came out in, early 1990s, that it could have been adapted much sooner and had 80s or 90s CGI that just doesn't hold up. And in 10, 15 years, the CGI that's in the show isn't going to hold up. Unfortunately, that's just the way that the technology goes. But it was still believable, and that's the point, is that it was believable. Like, I thought the Trollocs looked great. I thought the eyeless and the fades, they looked amazing.
They were scary as fuck.
They were scary as fuck. I mean, what else do you want? I think the weaves were beautifully well done. I couldn't, I mean, in my mind, when I was reading the series, I didn't picture it that way, but it worked. I understood what was happening, And it goes back to the fact that, like, we have the privilege of enjoying this story told with the aid of decent visual and practical effects.
Yeah.
I think that they did a good job of mixing that up between practical and CGI. And I think that one of the tricks with creating, animated models of something for film is that when things are moving fast or they're far away, in order to save the amount of render time that the computer has to make that image, they reduce the quality of the textures so that it essentially gets done on time. So along with the fact that CGI and visual effects have come a long way, and it could be worse to the point where there's also a budgetary reasons here too.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. I'll concede that they definitely spent more on some scenes with CGI than with others, like when Rand is hallucinating, oh Christ, the dark one, the quote unquote dark one. It's a little goofy, but who cares? Because the scene with Nynaeve, uh, letting out that power blast, uh, the CGI, was so worth it, and so well done. And who doesn't want a little goofiness in their fantasy, right?
Right.
Yeah,
But
there's got to be.
Um, so
I was
I had
gonna
no complaints.
I was gonna ask if either one of you if there was any, and I guess Matt, you kind of mentioned one, but were there any CGI moments that just stuck out as poorly done? Um, I can't really think of any that I was just like, wow, that was pretty bad. But I don't have the trained eye that Justin does, and I don't remember as much from the probably the second half of the season as I do from the first. But to me, there's nothing that's sticking out that, like you said, Justin, that wasn't believable. Um,
right. I think the only instance that I can think of off of the top of my head that looked a little odd was Joya, their baby. Um, when when it's picked up, like you could totally tell that it's CGI, but it's not like, I mean, if you're really looking at it, yeah, of course, it's CGI. I mean, how do you get a baby to do that? That
Yeah,
was the only thing that really stood out for me as far as CGI goes.
yeah, I'm very forgiving when it comes to things like that. People, it's hard to make something like The Wheel of Time without a massive, massive effects budget, and you're gonna have to use that budget on certain power moment scenes, like again, Nynaeve's healing of everyone in episode 4, the CGI of the battle in episode 8. So you're gonna get some places where they not cut corners, but where it doesn't make sense for them to commit as much money to that specific scene, like with Baalzamon and his glowing eyes in Rand's dream. It's a little goofy, and I can tell it's CGI, but I mean, am I really going to complain about that? Not really, because it's Baalzamon being naughty, and it's not something big like again the battle at Valme, and it's not something like that. The one concern we talked about on our podcast was how they're going to do the battle in the sky from the Great Hunt, because, and all four of us agreed, I don't think there's any way or any amount of CGI budget that could make a big battle in the sky not look like the climax of some 1980s techno sci-fi movie. So I don't know.
I guess it just kind of brings me to another point with visual effects and CGI in general is, I think because of the technology now that the horsepower is there to create visually stunning games and movies,
Hmm.
it's bleeding into this realm of what is called hyper realism, and it's basically just realism in art characterized by depictions of real life in an unusual or striking manner. So what is happening is we're kind of getting to this point where like we're desensitized by what actually looks real, because the precedent is set so high in detail. Like our brains don't think in hyperrealism.
Hmm.
We are not we're not when we're looking at each other, we're not seeing every pore on everybody's face. We're not seeing every little like hair that is coming out of every follicle. We're not seeing the dirt under people's nails from that distance. And I think that it's just gotten to the point where people are expecting this type of quote unquote realism, when in actuality that's not how our brain is interpreting life, which is still the reason why we know it's CGI.
Yeah, and I think you're always going to have that with CGI because we're very new relatively uh, at this sort of artificial effects. We've our eyes have been developing for millions of years until, we have what we have now. And we're going to be able to tell when something isn't quite real. But like you said, uh, that sort of hyper realism isn't something that a lot of people are going to catch. Or it's sort of like the uncanny valley effect when you see uh, artificial intelligence or like a robot that looks almost human, but it's not. If you try to go too hyper real, people are going to know that it's not, and it's going to create an unsettling effect.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's all. Those are my only points for the VFX and the CGI. Could it be better? Sure. But
I
for
mean,
what it
anything could
was,
be improved, right?
right. And I
Except
think
for
that,
Jurassic Park, the
right.
OG Jurassic Park.
Right.
Gotta defend those
Not the
dinosaurs.
not the newest one.
I have not seen Jurassic Kingdom or whatever that. I've seen the first two and the new ones, and I have not seen the third one. I am just referring to the cinematic narrative masterpiece that is Jurassic Park.
It is. Yeah. There's.
Yeah, there's nothing that I would change in that movie.
I did enjoy the newer ones, but the OG is close to perfection as you can get. Not to bring the topic back on the dinosaurs and alligators, but like you said, I think the CGI is not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. And there comes a point that CGI is almost too good, and we can tell, and it creeps us out, and not in a good way. And I really have no complaints with what we got. Like I said, the scenes where the CGI should have been really good, they were really good, and where it didn't matter so much and it was a little goofy, that's fine. Fantasy is a goofy genre. People who take their fantasy too seriously are people I don't really want to be friends with.
Right. Exactly.
It's a very
And
good
I
point.
mean, everyone's got their own interpretations on what it is, the words that you're reading on the page. It's Derek, Matt, and we're reading very well could be reading the same book and totally have a different idea as to what happened. And this is
Mhm.
very, very evident in, just the show that Derek and I do when we're reading this
Yeah.
book at the same time. There's many instances where like Derek brings this thing out of left field and I'm like, I didn't see it that way at all. And then it's just I feel like that's a good way to be cohesive and be open to others' perspectives because it may or may not, more often in my case, it does kind of add to the story for me.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
we all um, we all perceive stories in different ways, and there's never going to be a uh, even with visual mediums, people thirsting over different actors. Some people are going to be just gobsmacked by how gorgeous uh, Egwene is, and some are like, oh yeah, she's attractive, but not really my type, and they'll more be going Google eyes over Moraine or Nynaeve. So like even with these quote unquote objective media, we still perceive things in a different way, and that's fine. It's the way it's supposed to be. If everyone perceived things the exact same way and everything was uniform, it'd be pretty boring.
right, exactly. I think that I feel like we've done a very good job of kind of debunking some of the mythos of perception around writing and visual effects.
Hmm.
Should we maybe go move on to what it is that we think we got right or what they did well?
Sure. Um, I guess the top of my head, the one, I will listen to reasonable criticism or critiques of the show, but one thing I absolutely will not listen to is criticism of the music. I think the music was probably some of the best fantasy music I've ever heard.
So
The
good.
It was
the
good.
it's just so it's ethereal, it's grounded, it's earthy. It it sort of taps into some of that epic fantasy music that we know and love. but it also goes into its own rhythm, and it's just beautiful. It's beyond beautiful, and I will not hear any criticisms about the music.
I really liked that we got some guitar in there too, like
Uh-huh.
some like electric, like it just yeah. That was one of the things that I really loved about it too.
Yeah, and it's the sort of world where a guitar makes sense.
Right, exactly. 100%.
I think one thing I would like the locations that they were shooting this all looked amazing. Where was it? Czechoslovakia or I don't remember where it was, but man, like I want to go over there and see some of those places because they just look great.
Hmm. Agreed. No, to say visually stunning is what I was going to say. So you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I agree. Definitely visually stunning. I think my favorite, the one that stands out for me, is that like aerial shot of the eye of the world. And with all of the steps kind of leading down, quote, to like the eye, it it emulated the colors that you would see in an eye. It gave that light and dark, that light and shadow type look, so it actually looks like your whole iris and pupil. It
Hmm.
was just so cool. I loved that.
Yeah, it's I really can't think of anything like visual, like any critiques as far as like the visuals go. Like every city, every town felt fully lived in. You all know me, or maybe not. I love dark, scary, spooky things, and Shadar Logoth and the Ways were neither of them was neither of them were as I imagined. Both were better than I ever thought they could be. Um, I have my own headcanon of how they look in the books, and that's fine. And the way the show portrayed them was just gorgeous. So
Yeah,
I
no, I would agree. I'm also a fan of the darker side of nonsense, so to speak. So, um, yeah, Shadar Logoth and the ways. Not exactly what I imagined in my head when I was reading it, but it was there visually. And now when I do go through a reread, I feel like there will be a lot of things that I have seen from the show that I will implement in my read through.
Yeah. And some of the things, going back to Perrin's wife, there are certain things in the books that just are difficult to convey to screen. And one is Perrin's very internalized trauma and how his character arc progresses. The other is the ways. Like in the books, it's so dark you can't see ahead or behind you in either direction, and that just really wouldn't work from a tension standpoint on screen. And giving us a bit more uh, visuals in the ways, and also using the Black Wind in a more existential horror, like cosmic horror type of way, as opposed to what it is in the books. Just really, it worked for the medium. In the books, it says that it wants to rip their flesh and to drink their blood and stuff, which is creepy. And
Mm.
Robert Jordan was an amazing horror writer. We have a Halloween episode coming up where I basically give a little mini lecture on why Robert Jordan was such a good horror writer. But for the show, what the Wind did by digging into each person's personal fears and advancing the plot was like the absolute perfect example of to change, how to make changes in an adaptation in a way that is faithful to the source material.
I'll be excited to hear that when it comes out.
Yeah, I read a lot of I read a lot of excerpts from the Ways. I wish Robert Jordan had. I wish we had had more time with him on Earth, because I think he could have written a really, really good horror novel. His horror writing is spectacular.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think, and I know that I touched on this a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but I really enjoyed how the show captured characters' personalities with Nynaeve, Perrin, Moraine,
Hmm.
Rand, Matt, Tom, etc. Like all of their actions and the way that they held themselves in the show were very reminiscent of how I imagine them in the books. So I
Hmm.
think that that was something that they got spot on. Um, even if it wasn't something that came directly like an action from the book.
Yeah, they really captured the essence of every character, I think. Even Matt, who I didn't feel much of a connection with, which, it's if we were going to lose an actor, Dagger Matt is probably the best time to do it because Dagger Matt is not really a character that resonates with a lot of people. He's sort of a feral creature for like the better part of 3 books. So,
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
yeah. Other than him, they captured the essence of pretty much everybody. And to sort of segue into addressing some complaints about Moraine and Swan, like it's all there. It's all in the books. New Spring is very, the word we used was sapphic between Moraine and Swan.
Pillow friends.
Yeah, pillow friends. Unless you're in the Black Tower, and then it's sword buddies. But but I think they really did Robert Jordan justice when they because he was I believe an LGBTQ ally in as much as one can be when you're a Southern white man who's on the more progressive end of things. But back then you just didn't write stuff that was as explicit. And he sowed the seeds for Moraine and Swan's relationship, and I think the show basically brought to fruition the vision that he initially had with those 2 characters, and I think it was one of the more beautiful parts of the show, and I am not looking forward to later book adaptations because of things that happen unless they change certain things. But my emotions are not ready.
I mean, being that we know the book series pretty well, where do you think that the show will take Tom and Moraine and Gareth Bryne and Swan?
So I give Robert Jordan a lot of credit for world building, for his horror writing, especially his fantasy building. I cannot say with a straight face that he was a good romance writer.
Okay.
I think he was just really bad at writing romance. Some people can disagree, but I didn't buy Moraine and Tom's relationship in the books at all. It just seemed out of left field for me.
Yeah.
Swan and Gareth's was okay, I guess. But once I read New Spring, I was like, wait, this is so much better than Swan and Gareth. Why couldn't we have had this? So I honestly think that bisexuality exists. So of course Moraine and Tom could become a thing. But given everything that we know about how they've set up the characters, I would not be sad at all if they just nixed the Tom and Moraine romance. Because I'm sorry, anyone who claims to be a diehard Tom and Moraine lover and claims that it's like the best romance they've ever read in all of fantasy, and it's just a travesty to change it. I'm not sure if I can buy that. There are, despite the fact that I say he didn't write good romances, there are better romances in The Wheel of Time, like Nynaeve and Lan. So my wish list, my pipe dream is that Moraine and Swan both make it through the last battle and they go off to live in a little lesbian cottage on the sea, and neither one of them has to deal with feral children or cranky chosen ones ever again. That's what I'd like to see.
Do you think that the way Robert Jordan wrote Tom in with Moraine, do you think that it was probably a kind of like a representation of the time back in the 90s where, 50s, 60s, 70s, where, bisexualism and, being, I guess, in the closet, so to speak? Do you think that like that was maybe just a representation of the times that we were in at that particular moment?
I think to me it seems like he didn't quite know what to do with Moraine from a romantic standpoint. To me, it's clear that he put a lot of subtext in with Moraine and Swan. I mean, it's very clearly, it's not even subtext in New Spring, but in the main series, you could call it subtext. And I think him pairing her up with Tom was sort of a just, well, I don't know what else to do with this, so I'm just going to put them together. Um, and it was what you would call a mainstream fantasy series. There are certainly examples of queer fantasy that preceded Robert Jordan. Ellen Kushner is a writer who is still alive, and she wrote a book called Swords Point, that was published a few years before The Eye of the World. And in Swords Point, everyone is bisexual. Pretty much every character is bisexual. I don't think they use the word bisexual. It's a fantasy world, but the concept exists, and everybody is that. And there were certainly depictions like Ursula K. Le Guin, who I've mentioned before on this episode. She was a brilliant science fiction fantasy writer. And one of her most famous books is The Left Hand of Darkness, in which a research scientist goes to a planet under his federation, and the inhabitants of this planet change their biological sex depending on how they want to interact with their romantic partners. Some partners will change into male and some will change into female. It's a very biologically sexually fluid society. So these things existed before Robert Jordan's time, and he certainly had them as examples of how to portray these things. I just don't think, the purpose of the Wheel of Time isn't to play with the idea of sexual orientation necessarily as much as it was to not undermine, but to subvert and expand upon and pay homage to the tropes that Tolkien made popular. So I don't think it was his goal necessarily to portray these things. And he certainly had examples from which to choose from, but I don't blame him at all for not making Moraine and Swan in game or something like that. It's I very rarely blame someone from a certain time period for how they wrote something. Some exceptions like Lovecraft and his racism, but yeah, that's a very long-winded answer, probably, but there is.
I think it works good.
I like that. Thank you for that beautiful explanation. I'll have to reach out and grab that book from you because that sounds super interesting.
Oh yeah, Ursula K. Le Guin. Just I think any fantasy reader, sci-fi lover, should read her stuff. She was brilliant. She was truly one of the most brilliant American sci-fi fantasy writers we've ever had. And I am always spreading the gospel of Ursula.
I know I've heard the name, but I just haven't read her work.
Yeah, and here's to bring it back to the show. Like I said, her Earthsea series was mostly people of color. Her Islanders, and Earthsea is the name of the land. They're mostly black and brown people, and there's only one island that is predominantly white. Well, the Sci-Fi Channel very loosely adapted the first two books and made almost every single main character white, and you don't see any complaints from that specific type of fantasy fan, the book purists, I would call them. We didn't see any complaints. She famously ripped them apart in a blog post and said that they butchered her vision by whitewashing the entire cast. But you didn't get any complaints from the types of people who complained about Nynaeve and Zoe. Zoe and Madeline and Marcus.
I wonder why that was.
Yeah.
I understand why.
Yeah.
God, that makes me upset. But I guess the only thing that I think that they did well was so my partner, she I feel like she enjoys fantasy books, but she definitely does not read as frequently as I do, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that she liked the show, and I thought that it was easily digestible for non-readers of the show to follow, or non-readers of the books in order to follow the show. I also work with a couple of librarians, and they have not read the books, but one of them did watch the show, and she said that she really enjoyed it as well. And this is coming from somebody who reads literally everything, every type of genre. Um, so I think that that was also a big part of the way that they made or decided to do things, was just this kind of like happy balance between how do I explain this thing that is overly complicated in the books that would be easier to understand if just read, and portray that visually to someone who has also read it. But the advantage there is kind of that expectation from the makers of the show, is that the readers have an expectation, there's an expectation for the readers to understand what is happening because they've read the book, um, and catering it to people who have not.
Hmm. There is a delicate balance there, and I think they did as well as they could have under the circumstances. Amazon only giving them 8 episodes. The universal complaint I've seen from show lovers is that the show would have been at its best with 10 episodes. And that's something that we can't fault Rafe and the production team for, because Amazon wouldn't give it to them.
Right.
So you have to make a lot of sacrifices with what you're going to show audiences and the tone that you want to convey, and so that people who've never seen the show can draw. Because catering a show just to the book lovers is never going to work. It's just not going to, because like Game of Thrones was considered a very faithful adaptation for many seasons. But having read both the books and seen the show, I think it appealed to a wider audience because of how they divided the chapters and how they divided the episodes. And they did make a lot of cuts. People don't realize that they cut a whole lot out of the books, the Game of Thrones or the Song of Ice and Fire books. It's just that, all the characters were white and, there were no racial minorities, or not a lot of them in the show. So those types of people were willing to give it more leeway. And then, of course, we had, the last few seasons, which seemed to be universally hated. But yeah, like, you can never really adapt something faithfully and just for book readers, because it's just not going to work out with wider audiences.
Yeah, it's just there's no way to please everybody.
So,
well, I think we've covered quite a bit here. Is there anything either one of you would want to add to anything we've already talked about?
I think I touched on the points that I talked about. I mentioned in the notes that a lot of people complained about the changes to the Eye of the World, but a lot of us forget that the Eye of the World was meant as a tribute to Tolkien. And back when it was written, this new take on Tolkien was fresh and new, but it's been 32 years actually since the Eye of the World was published. And if they had faithfully, quote unquote, adapted the stories from the Eye of the World, it would have been very derivative. We've been there, done that with undermining and subverting trope expectations. So it would have flopped with audiences. It would have totally flopped with non-book readers, because they would say, "Oh, well, we've seen this before."
Right. And
Yeah.
I feel like we got to get our Winter Dragon conversation in here. I feel like that was a very catered to the prologue, almost beat for beat, as far as the prologue plays out, and it was fucking terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It was god awful.
Yep.
I think that while I do have a little some gripes about some of the pacing, I felt like it was almost necessary to make sure that it didn't follow the tropes of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, but also make sure that we don't have another Winter Dragon here.
Mm-hmm. Though I think it would be hilarious if they brought Billy Zane on as one of the Forsaken.
That would be cool.
Just kind of that wink and nod to the few people that watch that.
Yeah. I think the fandom would, the regular show viewers, non-book readers would be like, oh, it's Billy Zane. I know him. And the book viewers and people who remember Wonder Dragon would lose their shit, probably in a funny way. Be a nice little bit of weird fan service.
Yeah, it would. I don't know how I would feel about it, honestly. I guess I mean, it'd be fine, I think.
He's a competent actor. If they were going to play it serious and make him an actual Forsaken, or else just like give him a cameo, that people like, either you know it or you don't know it, and it doesn't affect the story either way type of cameo.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know about you fellows, but I feel like we've done the Wheel of Time season 1 justice. So
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm at the point where I don't know if I have anything else to contribute to what's already been said.
I have one thing that's going to come kind of out of left field for you here, Matt, if you don't mind a few more minutes.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay, so Justin and I are reading the Malazan series, which you know of it, but you've never read it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm pulling this a little bit from your show, but I'd like to play a game. So I wanted to do your fuck, marry, kill game.
Oh gosh.
With Malazan characters here, quick. So I was gonna give you 3, and then you had to decide, maybe make up a little story for them, and then maybe Justin can explain the characters for you, because he does a very good job at that. After the fact, I thought maybe just be something kind of fun here to see what kind of mark you get for these characters, what kind of beat you get on them. But Justin, I was kind of thinking Whiskey Jack, Tattersail, and Lysine. Or do you want to switch any of those out for anybody?
I think we should switch out Whiskey Jack for Crocus.
Okay. All right, Matt, take it away.
What am I? I don't. Who are these people?
That's we'll tell you after. You get to make up who they are for now.
Okay, so I'm supposed to like say who I think they are, and you'll tell me afterwards.
Yeah, and we'll give you if you want to pick your poison for the Bond, Igloo, and Balefire.
Okay, so who are the characters again?
We've got Crocus, Tattersail, and Lysine.
Okay. Ooh, I would say. Okay, so Tattersail is a really weird name, and this person sounds like they would be fun to be around, maybe drinking at the pub. So I'd say Igloo them. They sound like a maybe a jokester type of character, maybe someone who gets into a bit of trouble. So let's bond them, or let's Igloo them. Crocus, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Crocus sounds. I don't know. He sounds like a guy. Sounds maybe sort of like a villain character. Maybe someone who, I don't know. Maybe he wears an eye patch, like a pirate eye patch. It sounds like a pirate name almost. And I'm not a big fan of pirates, so I'd Balefire him. And Lysine sounds like a woman, but it sounds like someone who has a good head on her shoulders. Maybe she's a mage. It sounds like a very magical name, and so maybe I would bond her. Just marry someone who make for a good roommate or something like that. She sounds like she wears a lot of light colors. Maybe, I don't know. I have very little to go on, and I'm going based just off of their names, and I probably am really way off base. So
well, you got your child violence in, so now maybe you'll get canceled.
Did I Balefire a child?
Yeah, a young person, anyways. At least so far, we haven't explicitly been given their age, but a younger person, yeah.
All right. So who are these people?
So Tattersail is she is a mage, and yeah, she's a bit voluptuous, which one of her nicknames is Soft Pillows, which that that I'm all for it. Give me it. I want it right now. And she's a mage that has the ability to, I guess, read what is called the deck of dragons, which is, I would closely associate to tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
So she has this kind of ability to like read the future based on the way that these cards lay out, and she kind of gets involved with some people and is part of a empire that she kind of sees some wrongdoing happening and kind of flips sides, so to speak.
Interesting.
And then she sacrifices herself and then is reborn, so to speak, in a very interesting way. And then,
Is she reborn with bigger boobs or something?
well, I mean, they're developing. They're developing boobs. Haven't quite gotten to the soft yet. And then Crocus, he is a youth who makes really terrible, kind of that like whiny type persona. Doesn't really understand what's going on, complains about it, but also very, very prominent to the developing of the story. And
sounds like I was right to balefire him.
Yeah, yes. I've felt that way many times reading his sections, but I get why he's still not bail fired. And then what was the other one again?
Lysine.
Lysine is basically the right-hand woman. You were right about the woman there. She's the right-hand woman of the Empress of this conquest, so to speak. And she is out to basically make moves to try to weaken other gods that are directly opposing the Empire. Yeah, and
oh, she sounds fun.
Yeah.
So she's a villain.
She's definitely a villain. She's got some
cool
doubts sprinkled throughout the book, that kind of come back to past traumas, specifically with Tattersail. So yeah, it's if you like Wheel of Time, like I definitely feel like you would eat up Malazan Books of the Fallen.
Yeah, I've heard good things about Malazan. I can't say that it's on my reading list now, but it's on my radar for sure. God, I have so many books to get through.
So many books. Get to that point.
My TBR list, I call it the shame pile because it used to be an actual pile of books until it got to be too big, and now I just shelved them all, and I have a list that I've written down. It's like 100 something books right now. And I'm as it's currently October when we're recording this, and I have made it my goal to read 13 spooky books in October, and I'm probably going to finish book number 7 today. So I'm getting there. But
damn, yeah, I've seen you've been cruising right along on Twitter, so that's impressive because I mean, I think we could do this faster, with what we're reading, but we purposefully choose just to do one chapter a week. But
yeah, and Allie and Gus from Wheel Takes, they do something similar. He is a Wheel of Time veteran and she's a first time reader, and they take it slow. So yeah, I'll definitely put Malazan on my my radar.
Have you, since you're reading spooky books, have you ever read Mr. Begone by Clive Barker?
I have not. I have read The Thief of Always is the only book of his I've read, and it was really good. But I've not read other Clive Barkers.
You should totally check out Mr. Begone. Hellbound Heart is the book based on, or Hellraiser is based on that book. And then he's also got a compilation of short stories called the Books of Blood. Those are also very well done as well.
Yeah, I have only ever read that book, and I've seen the first Hellraiser, but he strikes me as someone who is excellent with the creepy, spooky stuff on a more fantasy type of perspective. I'm big into Stephen King, which if y'all have seen my Twitter profile with Banner's The Dark Tower series, the original hardbacks. So it's probably obvious.
I haven't read any of Stephen King stuff.
It's probably best to not talk about it right now because I could talk about him for quite some time. So it's best to just not.
Sounds good.
Well,
Maybe
thank
when
you for indulging my random question there also, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, anytime. Alligator discourse. I'm always here for that sort of that sort of random stuff. I'm very random and chaotic as a personality, so all here
Gotta have
for
those
it.
people.
Yeah.
Yep. I am the same way. Except it's more towards like artwork. I really love messed up shit.
Ugh, excuse me. Got the hangover yawns.
Well, I guess I feel like Derek and I always do this typical Minnesota goodbye when it comes to ending an episode, and I think it just comes down to, I had a lot of fun today, and I don't really want it to end, but I don't know if I can contextually add uh, any more points to my Defense of World or Wheel of Time season one without maybe analyzing some things that we haven't talked about yet. So,
Yeah, if we Minnesota goodbye the podcast, we'll be recording until tomorrow probably.
right, with many attempts to say goodbye.
I definitely fit into Minnesota because when I moved up here, the Minnesota goodbye was like the first thing I adapted to. So,
Well, I would
yeah,
I
it
would
was
say
great. It
we're
was great to be on. It was really fun being on the show. I'm glad that y'all invited me.
definitely. I'm glad you were able to make it, and thank you for taking some time out of your day here to chat with us, and appreciate everything you had with the conversation. It was a really good one.
Oh yeah, you betcha, as they say up here. You bet.
You betcha.
How about that weather?
All right. Damn.
Sure is cold today. Let's see all the other Minnesota isms I can get in before we stop.
Well, I guess enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully this hangover is not too debilitating for you. But
Nah, it's not that bad. A little Tylenol helped it out.
hell yeah.
I'm just starting to lose focus a little bit, so might be time for a nap. I'm getting to that age.
Yep, I will probably be joining the nap state soon.
All right, well, I guess do we end recording, or just leave?
You can just leave. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks for having me on, and I hopefully will talk to y'all later.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Definitely.
It was
Thanks
a
again, Matt.
pleasure.
Later.
Bye.
Bye.